Do you need to pass GED Math? Then you might already know that the first handful of questions on the test make up the no calculator portion. And if you're not feeling prepared for the no calculator portion, don't worry, you're not alone. Some time ago, I put out a poll asking GED test takers how prepared they were feeling for the no calculator portion. 65% said they weren't feeling prepared. And if you're like most GED test takers, you want to pass GED Math as soon as possible so you can move ahead to bigger and better things in life like college or a better job or joining the military, whatever your goal happens to be. And in this video, my goal is to walk through no calculator practice questions and teach you tips, tricks, and strategies along the way, and we're going to get started now. Question on screen says solve for x, and we see x over 5 minus 2 equals 4. So now's your chance, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay, so the name of the game here is to get the x by itself on one side of our equation. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is add 2 to both sides. Now you might be wondering, why do we want to add 2 to both sides? Well, we have x over 5 minus 2. So if I add 2 over here, the 2's are going to cancel out, which gets us closer to getting the x. Now, whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. So that's why I have to add 2 over here as well. So when I rewrite this, we'll see that I get x over 5 equals 6. So now I have x over 5, which is x divided by 5. So how do I get the x by itself? Well, if I multiply by 5 over here on this side, the 5's will cancel out, leaving me with the x, which is what I want. But remember, whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. So I have to multiply by 5 over here as well. Now, what is 6 times 5? 6 times 5 is 30. So the correct answer here is C, 30. Multiply the two numbers and round your answer to the nearest tenth. And on screen, we see 4.15 times 3.2, and it says, please write your answer in the box below. Now, obviously, you won't really be able to write your answer through the screen, so maybe if you have a sheet of paper nearby, you can write it down on paper or however you want to do it. But now would be a good time if you'd like to pause the video and try this out, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about this question. And right off the bat here, I want to point out that if we had multiple choice answers here, we could possibly guess and get the right answer. So if you ever get a question like this and you have multiple choice answers, you could kind of say to yourself, well, 4 times 3 is 12. So I know that the answer has to be something greater than 12. And then you could eliminate any answer choices that are less than 12, and anything significantly bigger than 12, you could also rule it out. And you could sometimes use a strategy like that and guess the right answer in just a really short period of time. So just keep that in mind if you ever get a question like this on the no calculator portion and it's multiple choice. But here, since this isn't multiple choice, we're going to have to solve it out. And whenever I do a question like this, or whenever I teach a question like this, I like to stack them one on top of the other. Now, it's totally up to you if you want to do this or not. So what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply the numbers together, and we're going to ignore the decimals and worry about them at the end. So first I'm going to do 2 times 5. Now, 2 times 5 is 10, so I'm going to put the 0 here, and I'm going to put the 1 up here. Now I'm going to do 2 times 1, which is 2. Then I have to add the 1, so I get 3. So now what I'm going to do is 2 times 4, which gives me 8. So now I'm going to do 3 times 5, 3 times 1, and 3 times 4, but I have to remember to put a 0 down here first. Okay, so now let's do that. So what is 3 times 5? 3 times 5 is 15. So I'm going to put the 5 down here, and I'm going to put the 1 up here. So now I do 3 times 1. 3 times 1 is just 3, plus another 1 gets me 4. So now what is 3 times 4? 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so now what we have to do is add the numbers up. So 0 plus 0 is 0. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 plus 4 is 12, and then 2 plus 1 is 3, and then I bring this 1 down here. So now we're going to deal with the decimals. So what I want to do here is I want to count how many digits I have to the right of my decimals. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, absolutely no worries, because I'm going to break it down now. So if I look at 4.15, I see that I have 2 digits to the right of the decimal. And if I look at 3.2, I see that I have one digit to the right of the decimal. So in total, the two numbers that I'm multiplying together have 3 digits to the right of the decimals. So what I'm going to do in my answer is add the decimal here, and by doing that, we'll see that I have 3 digits to the right of the decimal. So again, what I did was I looked back at the two numbers that I was multiplying together, and I counted up the number of numbers beside the decimals, right? So I went 1, 2, 3. So then I added the decimal here because that would give me 3 digits to the right of my decimal. So we're almost done here, and in order to bring it home here, what we have to do is round. So in this case, we need to round to the nearest tenth. So what I want to do first is identify the number in the tenths place. So the 2 right here is in the tenths place. So now I want to go next door and look at the number beside it, and I want to ask myself if it's a 5 or greater, and it is, it's 8. So I have to round up. So what I'm going to do is write 13.3. All right, so again, I picked out the number that was in the tenths place, and I saw that the number beside it was greater than 5, so I rounded up, and that's how I got 13.3. Patrick borrowed $800 from Sandy for 6 months after he agreed to pay simple interest at the annual rate of 6%. What is the total amount Patrick will pay back in 6 months? Now, since we're just practicing to save you some time, I put the formula for simple interest up here. It's I equals PRT, where I equals interest, P equals principal, R equals rate, and T equals time. But if you get a question like this on your test, you'll want to go to the formula sheet that they'll give you and look up this formula. So now's your chance, if you'd like to pause the video, try this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Now, the first thing that I want to point out here is that the question is asking, what is the total amount Patrick will pay back? So I'm going to underline payback here because we don't just want to calculate the interest, we want to figure out the total amount he will pay back. And if you're not sure why I'm taking the time to underline that, hopefully it'll be more clear as we get towards the end of the question. So to start off here, let's plug the numbers that we have into our formula. I equals PRT. So the principal is the initial amount, right? So Patrick borrowed $800. So 800 is going to go into the formula for P. Okay, so let me start with that, 800. Now, what about the rate? Well, it says an annual rate of 6%. So 6% as a decimal is 0.06. All right, so a common mistake would be to look at this 6% and think that 6% as a decimal is 0.6. But it's actually not 0.6, it's actually 0.06. So if we had 60%, okay, 60% equals 0.6, but here we have 6%, and 6% equals 0.06. So what about the time? Well, the important thing for time is that you want to write time in terms of years. So here we've got 6 months. So 6 months is half a year. So I'm going to write half right here. All right. So again, we want to write time in terms of years. So what if we had 5 months? What would we do? If we had 5 months, what I would do is write 5 over 12 because there are 12 months in a year. If we had, 1 month, right, I would do 1 over 12. Okay, but here we have 6 months. And remember, 6 over 12 reduces to 1/2. All right, 6 months is half a year, so that's why I have half right here. So now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and do the calculation. And without a calculator, this can be a little bit tricky. And there are multiple ways to look at this, but right off the bat, one thing that I see here is that we can do 800 divided by 2. And if we do 800 divided by 2, we get 400. And that makes this a little bit simpler here, because that'll give us 400 times 0.06. So how do we do 400 times 0.06 without a calculator? Well, again, there are multiple ways to do this. One way to do it would be to just kind of write them stacked on top of each other. So you could write it like this, 400 times 0.06. So from here, what I would do is 6 times 0, which is 0, 6 times 0, which is 0, and then 6 times 4, which is 24. So now I have 2,400, and I want to put the decimal here. And I see that I've got 2 digits to the right of my decimal. So I want to put the decimal right here. So that tells us that the interest is 24. So this is one way to do 400 times 0.06. Now, another way to do it could be to look at that 0.06 and change it to a fraction. So instead of doing 400 times 0.06, you could do 400 times 6 over 100. Because 0.06 as a decimal is equal to 6 over 100 as a fraction. Now from here, what you could do is you could cancel out the zeros, right? So that would give you 4 times 6, which is 24. All right, so those are just two different ways, and it's up to you how you want to approach a scenario like this, but those are two different ways you could do it. And if you have another way to approach this, that's perfectly fine too. There are multiple ways to look at this, but right now we've got 24, and it would be easy to say, hey, well, 24, that's the correct answer here. And if you did this, absolutely no worries, because we're just practicing for right now. If you have multiple choice answers on the test, you might be able to catch yourself if you get 24 here and you don't see that as one of the answers. But for a question here where you have to come up with your own answer, all right, this would be an easy mistake to make. So now that we have 24, what we have to do is add that back to 800. So remember earlier on in the question where I underlined the payback, I did that just to remind us that 24 is not the final answer here. So to get the final answer, we have to do 24 plus 800, which gives us 824. So the final answer here is 824. I'm excited to announce that this video's champion shoutout goes out to a test taker who says, I have always struggled with math and I put off taking the math segment for 4 years. Today I passed, and the test taker went on to say, I looked at my score and thought it was a joke when I saw that I passed. For everyone else, if I did it, you definitely can. And I want to give a big congratulations to the test taker, and anyone out there watching this, just remember what the test taker said. If I did it, you definitely can. Which expression below represents the distance between points x and y on the number line? Now, right here, we see that this dot's at -2, and we see that the dot for y is at 1. So let me give you a chance now, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time that you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll go over it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do here is imagine that we've got a little stick figure person. And the stick figure person is going to start at our dot at -2 and walk towards the dot at 1. So if the stick figure person did that, we would see that this person would walk 1, 2, 3 steps to get to 1 here. All right, so let me back up here. Again, between -2 and 1, we see that we've got 1, 2, 3 steps here. All right, so what we have to do now is come down here and we want to do the math for each answer choice until we get one that equals 3. So for A, -2 plus 1, there's two ways to do this. We could just do the math, -2 plus 1, and get the answer to this, or we could use the number line. So if we use the number line, we would start at -2, and since it's plus 1, we would go to the right one, which would get us to -1. So we know that -2 plus 1 is -1, which isn't 3, so we're going to rule answer choice A out. So now let's check B. So let's do the number line method. So if we start at -2 and we see that now we've got -1, we have to go to the left one. So we see that -2 minus 1 equals -3. And again, if you don't want to use the number line, that's fine. You can just do the math. -2 minus 1 equals -3. But either way, we'll see that B does not equal +3, so we'll take B out. So now let's try answer choice C. So we see here that we've got these two bars here. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to do -2 minus 1, and if it's something negative, it's going to become positive. All right, so this is an absolute value. And I have a video on absolute values. I'll put a link to that down below if you want to study the topic more in depth here. I'm just kind of giving you a really quick crash course here. But basically, let's do -2 minus 1. So if we start off at -2 on the number line, and we see that we've got -1, we know that we want to go to the left one. So -2 minus 1 is -3. But because we've got this within the absolute value, it becomes +3. So we know that the absolute value of -2 minus 1 is +3. So the correct answer here is C. questions on screen, let me give you a chance now if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out. Then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is plug 4 in everywhere I see an A, because we know that A equals 4. Now let me rewrite this, and I'm going to replace all of the A's with 4's. So here's what we get when we replace all of the A's with 4's. So now let's do some math here. So what is 4 squared? 4 squared is the same as 4 times 4, which is 16. So then what is 3 times 4? 3 times 4 is 12. And then I have the plus 2. And then 4 plus 6 is 10. So once you get to this point in the problem, there are two different ways you could do this. Now, one thing that you could do is divide all the numbers here by 2, because these are all even numbers, right? So you could do 16 divided by 2, which would give you 8. And then you could do 12 divided by 2, which gives you 6. 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so then you would have this plus 1 here. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So then you would do 8 plus 6 plus 1, which would be 15. And you'd have 15 divided by 5, which gives us 3. So that's one way to do this. But you can also just add up the numbers, and whenever you want to, feel free to stack numbers on top of each other on the no calculator portion. So if you stack the 3 numbers in the top here on top of each other, we would see that we would do 2 plus 2, which is 4, plus 6, which is 10. So I'd put the 0 down here. Then I'd stick the 1 up here. You can barely see it because I'm in the way. But you'd do 1 plus 1 plus 1, which is 3. And then you'd have 30 divided by 10. And from here, you could cancel out a 0 from the top and bottom, which would give you 3 over 1, which is 3. So I just wanted to give you a couple different ways to think about this here. And at the end of the day, the answer here is 3. In the Champion Facts segments of my videos, I like to pop out from behind the screen and answer a question or two from a random question generator. And I do this just to try to make the video a little more fun and also to give you a quick break from math. And let's see what questions I get today. What streaming services do you use? Well, the main two that I use right now are Paramount Plus and Netflix, and in the past I've used Hulu and Peacock. Would you rather watch a horror movie or ride a roller coaster? It's been several years since I've been on a roller coaster, so I'd probably do that. What's your favorite movie? This is kind of a hard question for me to answer because I guess I don't really have just one favorite movie. I like the Lord of the Rings movies. I also like the Star Wars movies. One of my other favorite movies is The Goonies. I really like the movie Backcountry. I like the older Hitchcock movies like Vertigo and Rear Window. And I was just watching the Toy Story movies recently with my daughter. Toy Story 2 is probably my favorite. And I also really like the Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey movies from the 90s. And that's all that's coming to mind right now, but I'm sure I could think of some other things if I had more time. Would you rather go ziplining through the Amazon forest or ride a camel around the pyramids? Those both sound pretty cool. I would take the zipline though. After leaving her house, Danica drives 250 miles while traveling at an average speed of 50 miles per hour to arrive in New York City. 5 hours later, Danica makes the drive back to her house at the same speed. How much total time passed between when she initially left and when she returned home? Let me give you a chance now if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. So let's say that this is Danica's house, and this is New York City. And we know that she's going to drive from her house to New York City, and then 5 hours later, she's going to drive from New York City back to her house. Now, the first thing that I want to calculate here is how long it took for her to drive from her house to New York City. Now, we know that the distance is 250 miles, and we know that she drove at an average speed of 50 miles. So what I'm going to do here is 250 divided by 50. Now, fortunately, both the top number and the bottom number have a 0, so I can cancel the zeros out. And then I just do 25 divided by 5, which is 5. So we know that the drive from her house to New York City took 5 hours. And then we know that 5 hours later, she left. So we also add 5 for the 5 hours that she was in the city. And then how long did it take for her to drive from New York City back to her house? Well, we know that she made the drive back to her house at the same speed. So it's going to be the same exact value that we calculated in the first step. So we have to add another 5 hours here. So in other words, it took her 5 hours to drive from her house to New York City. So that's why I have the first 5 here. Then she stayed in New York City for 5 hours. So that's why I have the second 5. Then she drove back from New York City to her house, driving at the same speed. In other words, she drove at an average speed of 50 miles per hour, and we know that the distance would still be 250 miles, so that's where this other 5 came from, because the drive back is going to take another 5 hours. So 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 15, so the answer here is 15. So let's back up here before we move on, because I just want to clarify something important. You might be wondering, how would you know to do 250 divided by 50, right? So if you read the question and you didn't know that you had to do 250 divided by 50, one way that you could figure that out possibly is by using the distance formula, d equals rt. So on the formula sheet, they'll give you this formula so you don't have to memorize it, and the d stands for distance, the r stands for rate, and the t stands for time. And what you would want to do is start with this formula, and you'd want to solve it for t, right? In other words, you'd want to divide by r so that you'd get d over r equals t. So from here, then what you would do is take 250 and you'd plug it in for d, and you'd take 50 and plug it in for r, and that would give you the time that it took for her to go from her house to the city. And then you'd have to add 5 hours for the time she was in the city, and then you'd have to add another 5 for the time it took for her to drive back. But the key here is that you can use the distance formula to help you figure out how to answer questions like this. So the next question is on screen. Let me give you a chance now, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay, so how do you beat a question like this? Well, what you want to do is take the denominator of the fraction, and that's just a big word for what's in the bottom of the fraction, and you want to set it equal to 0 and solve for x. I'll say that again. For a question like this, what you have to do is take the denominator, or what's in the bottom of the fraction, and you want to set it equal to 0, and then you want to try to get the x by itself on one side of the equation. So I've got 5x plus 35 equals 0. So I'm going to subtract 35 from both sides. The 35s will cancel out here on the left, and when I rewrite, I'll have 5x equals negative 35. So again, the name of the game here is to solve for x. In other words, we want to get x by itself. So what I'm going to do now is divide by 5, and when I divide by 5 on the left, the 5s cancel out. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. So I see that x equals negative 7, because negative 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. So again, for a question like this, what you have to do is take the denominator, and you want to set it equal to 0 and solve for x. And the reason why this makes sense is because we can never get a 0 in the denominator, right? In math, we can't divide by 0. So we want to figure out which value of x will result in a 0 in the denominator. So in other words, if I plug negative 7 in here for x, I'll have 3 divided by negative 35 plus 35. Now, negative 35 plus 35 is 0, right? And we can't divide by 0. Now, another way to do this could be to take each value here and plug each value in for x until you see which one is going to give you a 0 in the denominator, but that might be a little bit time consuming to do without a calculator, but it's up to you how you want to do it. In my opinion, the one that we're going to go over next is the hardest question in the video, and if you disagree and you think a different question was harder, if you want to, please let me know down below in the comments. So without further ado, let's get into this video's Champions Challenge question. If 30% of an order of 75,000 bananas are lost in transit and then another 9% disappear after that, how many bananas are left? Is the answer A, B, C, or D? So now's your chance, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out. Take all the time you need, and if you get stuck, don't worry about it because we're just going to go over the answer. Okay, so there are multiple ways to look at this question here, and the way that I'm going to start it here is by trying to figure out what is 30% of 75,000. So I'm going to do 75,000 times 0.3. Now the reason I'm using 0.3 here is because 30% as a decimal is 0.3. So when I do the multiplication here, I'm just going to ignore the decimal until the end. So if I do 3 times 0, that's 0, 3 times 0 is 0, and 3 times 0 is also 0. 3 times 5 is 15, so I put the 5 down here, put the 1 up here. 3 times 7 is 21, plus another one is 22. So now I see that I've got one digit to the right of my decimal, so I'm going to put the decimal point right here. So I've got 22,500. So 22,500 is 30% of 75,000. So now what I want to do is do 75,000 minus 22,500. So this is going to tell me how many bananas were left after 30% got lost. So 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. Now, here I have 0 minus 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to this 5, and I'm going to cross it out, turn it into a 4, and I'm going to put a 1 right here in front of the 0 to make it a 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 2 is 2. 7 minus 2 is 5. So there's 52,500 bananas left after 30% of the 75,000 get lost. So next, I'm going to take the 52,500 and I want to figure out what is 9% of 52,500. Now this time here, I've got 9%. Now 9% as a decimal is 0.09. So 9 times 0 is 0. 9 times 0 is also 0. 9 times 5 is 45. So I'm going to put the 5 down here, and I'm going to put the 4 up here. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 plus 4 is 22. So I put the 2 here, and I put a 2 up here. Now 9 times 5 is 45. Plus 2 is 47. So here's what I'll have. But we're not quite done yet because we have to take into consideration the fact that we've got 2 digits to the right of our decimal. So I'm going to come down here and put the decimal right here. So now I've got 4,725, and the last step is to come back to the 52,500, and I'm going to subtract 4,725. Now, to get the final answer, we're going to do 52,500 minus 4,725. So 0 minus 5, what we have to do is go to the number next door and see if we can borrow. And in this case, this is also a 0. So we have to go to the number next door again. And we see that it's a 5. So I'm going to cross this 5 out, and I'm going to change it into a 4. Now I'm going to put a 1 in front of this 0 to make it a 10. And now I have to cross the 10 out, turn it into a 9. And then I'm going to put a 1 here in front of this 10. So what is, or a 1 here in front of the 0, I should say, which makes it 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 2 is 7. Now I have 4 minus 7. So I have to go to the number next door and borrow. So I'm going to cross this 2 out and make it a 1. Then I'm going to put a 1 here in front of the 4, which makes it 14. So 14 minus 7 is 7. So now in order to do 1 minus 4, I have to come over to the 5, cross it out, make it a 4. And then I have to put a 1 here. So 11 minus 4 is 7. And then I just bring that 4 straight down. So the final answer is 47,775, answer choice C. So C is the correct answer here. And for the sake of time, I went through that subtraction quickly, but if you'd like to see more examples of addition and subtraction, and maybe even multiplication and division without a calculator, please let me know down below in the comments. And also, just note here that, like I said at the beginning of my breakdown of the question, there are definitely multiple ways to look at this question, and you might have had a completely different take on how to do this question, but if you still got 47,775, know that you got the right answer.